one more talk on the Heart Sutra. Then I'll stop for now. First, a side note. I hope you had a chance to greet our great first ancestor, Bodhidharma, on your way in. If you didn't notice him, he's standing patiently waiting for you, just kind of by the front door in the corner of the building. Donated, I don't even know the name of the donor actually. It was organized by her friend who's named Steve Givens. Do you know Steve Givens? Oh. And I guess she is a collector of Asian art, and she moved away from Kent and wanted Bodhidharma to go to a good home. So check out Bodhidharma. It's pretty detailed carving, amazing carving, yeah, really beautiful. Carved out of one big piece of wood, and he's really heavy too. And hopefully he's completed his journey. So now we can have a koan. Why did Bodhidharma come from Kent? Yeah, the red-bearded barbarian. So some of you were here for some of the talks, or all of the talks maybe, on the Heart Sutra, which we just chanted, the first of 3. And fun, we're doing a couple more chants tonight than we have of late. And so we've already talked a lot about the central point of the sutra, which is to appreciate emptiness. This odd technical Buddhist term that translates as emptiness, which is a word that was used to point towards something much bigger than words. The kind of wide open, interpenetrated, fluid way things actually are, unlike the way we tend to think they are without really thinking about the way we're thinking. We tend to lock things down. This is this and this is that, and she's that way and I'm this way. And we tend to assume that things are sort of inherently the way they are. But the emptiness teachings say, no, look again, look again. And look again, not just so you'll be like in alignment with the credo or something. But look again, because that way of thinking creates rigidity and suffering and separateness. We talked a lot about how the main thing that we have trouble not making into a solid something is our self, our idea of who we are. That leads to all kind of trouble. But what else? The other thing that selfing leads to inevitably is othering, right? If there's selfing, then there's othering. And we are certainly seeing in the bigger world, and if we pay attention, we see this every day around us, the effects of othering. And the great moments of joy and connection when somehow all that's more transparent, less prevalent, less strong. The boundaries are down. Trust and vulnerability are here. And there's not so much selfing and othering. And those are the best moments, don't you think? So it may be useful to have the chant book. We're going to try to make a little progress tonight. Thanks, Mari. Because it's kind of convenient the way we arrange the words in the chant book on page 5 and 6. Page 5 is pretty much all about emptiness, and we spent a lot of time on it. So we'll finish up page 5. And then page 6 is like a whole new section, a whole new theme. And it's kind of like, well, what are the beneficial results of all this? Why is this a great thing? And how do we really bring it home into our lives? First, another little side note about translation. I am kind of fascinated by translation, as you might have noticed. In English, we directly and literally translated the Sanskrit term shunyata into emptiness. The Chinese, who do have a perfectly good word that literally means emptiness, instead of using that word, they used a word which pronounced something like kong, which actually means sky, like the sky. So they were a little more poetic. Maybe that would have been better, for us. The sky-like quality of reality, of ourselves, of each other. We're vast like the sky. So it'd be kind of fun. You can kind of rewrite the Sutra with that word if you want. So form does not differ from sky. The sky does not differ from form. Form itself is sky, sky itself form. And everything is like this. That's kind of fun, huh? To be the sky. The sky, is a great reality. A good thing we have the sky, We're so grateful that we have an atmosphere. But also a wonderful metaphor for our mind. Can we really embrace our mind as the sky, vast and open? And one of the things that's really great about the sky is the way it gives space for the weather, right? And we have lots of internal weather, right? It can be sunny in there or kind of gray and drizzly. It can be stormy. And there can be storms in the mind violent enough that they kill us, right? Like literally. And this has happened. But the sky has room for all the weather, So emptiness is like that. So much room. Space for everything. And when you feel like you're oppressed by the weather in your mind, and you're only seeing the darkness and the biting wind and the cold rain, and it's horrible, Maybe sometimes you'll remember, and practice will help us with this. Maybe sometimes you'll remember that behind even the thickest storm clouds, right? The worst storm, the hurricanes and typhoons and everything, behind all that always is the vast blue sky. It's one of the great things sometimes about going on the airplane. Have you ever had that experience in the airplane? When they go up to the 30,000 feet and sometimes you fly above the weather. You're doing a terrible thing for the climate, but it's really cool though. Wow. To be above the weather. And you remember that it's always true. So the last paragraph on page 5 continues the use of negation to try to do something. So the Heart Sutra is really condensed, like mega condensed. They couldn't have made it any shorter if they tried, and maybe they did try. Because in this whole section from the 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph, and now the 5th paragraph, the last paragraph on page 5, the sutra runs through a list of things and says no, 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 no. And here no is not to say that that doesn't happen or there's no experience of that. Like we know that we have eyes and ears and nose and all this, and we know that there are sights and sounds and smells and consciousness that arises from all this. We have this experience. The no here means this too is empty, and one way to read that no, to hear that no, is something like, is not really the way you think it is. But that would be way too many words, right? It'd be hard to chant too. So you can let's go look at it that way. Your eyes are not the way you think they are. Right? Your vision is not the way you think it is. Your consciousness is not the way that you think it is. So that paragraph, the 4th paragraph, is all about our experience of living, basically. The last paragraph is about 2 major fundamental Buddhist teachings, which are really useful, and the sutra is reminding us not to settle for our first impression, to practice them deeply, and to go beyond what even it says in the book, So the first one here says, there is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, neither old age and death, nor extinction of old age and death. So stop there. In the middle there is a ... which leaves out a whole big pile of stuff, which we'll have to save for 7 talks another time. But what that is the first and last of a set of 12 steps that are all about how a moment of experience comes into existence and vanishes again. It's called the 12-fold chain of interdependent arising. And it's a really cool teaching, but I will be restrained about it. But it basically says, first there's a moment of, awareness, and then, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And in the process of all that, you perceive things, you notice things, you have impulses about things. And in the standard way that things go in that chain of 12 steps, there's clinging, there's grasping, there's pushing away, there's suffering, Like it seemed really cool at first, but then, and then the whole thing runs all over again. So it sounds a little negative, but the Buddha's really trying to describe very systematically the way we get caught up in things. And then he says the way to get uncaught up in things is to do that whole process in reverse. Just run the thing backwards. Run it back to zero, Get back to the moment of experience, which we're doing in meditation. So that's the part about extinction. So that one little line there with a couple of no's is to say you should carefully study this teaching, which we'll do another time, on how each moment comes to be and how people tend to respond and react and get caught by things, and how we do all this practice and try to unravel this whole chain and get back to baseline, get back to peace. That too, we can go deeper. That too is not the way you think it is. No, no. And then the second half of this last paragraph is the most famous Buddhist teaching of all, with a bunch of no's. I was reading one commentary on this last little section here where it says no suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment. And the author of that book, a modern author, was saying, this must have been shocking, This was really like stirring the pot. The authors of this sutra and the sutras in its group, called the Wisdom Sutras, Prajnaparamita Sutras, they must have really been trying to get a rise out of the earlier Buddhists, the traditionalists, the fundamentalists, Be like showing up in church and, saying, "No God!" And a wise pastor would say, "Yeah, you're right, no God, that's why we love God." But probably they wouldn't all pull that off. Some would kick you out, probably. So maybe there was an element of that here too as well, like wake up, don't get so comfortable with these teachings. So this last one is the famous Four Noble Truths, which is a really, really useful teaching. 4 things to think about in terms of how things unfold. So we got list of 12, list of 4, 5 of this, right? Different ways of unpacking our experience. But this Four Noble Truths is just like the number 1 core teaching of Buddhism. And it's really sensible, actually. The first Noble Truth is the truth of suffering. And here the Buddha says, and I think it's hard to argue with these, that life where we're conditioned and believe we're separate and believe all the things that we believe is never going to be fully satisfying, right? It'll have its good moments for sure, But at the end of the day, right, it's like, why am I not content? I have everything I need. So this is a kind of a suffering. Because we're kind of betting on the wrong horse. We're leaning on something that's empty, right? And wishing it were solid. We want lasting satisfaction from things that aren't going to give us lasting satisfaction. So check yourself out. We all do this. You just have to see how it is for you, not just like listen to it as an idea. And the second noble truth is the truth of cause. So here it says no cause. And the Buddha pretty much figured out, and again I think it's true, that the sort of causal theme is grasping, is wanting things to be other than the way they actually are. Maybe you want more of something that you are attracted to, or less of something you are repulsed by. Maybe you wish for a world that was this way or that way, and this is reasonable, you know. It'd be great to have a better world. But there's something about the way we tend to do this, you know, that's sticky. It's the stickiness. So the second noble truth is stickiness, you know. Things get sticky for us. The cause. The traditional word that's used means thirst. Our continuous thirst, you know, unquenchable thirst. So that's like the first two of the four are like the problem statement, and the second two are the solution. So yeah, no worries, you know, hang in there. The third noble truth is cessation, that this, even the most subtle and pervasive and hard to quite figure out what the heck is bothering you kinds of suffering, are not permanent either. They too can stop. They too can cease. So here it says no cessation. Very bottom of page 5. No cessation. So there is cessation. That's why there's no cessation. That it's possible, you know, it's not, we're not stuck with this, you know. These are powerful patterns. It's not like some little thing like, oh yeah, I heard in the Dharma talk there's no suffering and I haven't suffered since. It's really great, you know. You should go to the Red Cedars Inn. They didn't even charge me, you know. No, right? It's planting seeds for a lifetime of practice. And it's not all or nothing either, right? There can be a little less suffering, a little less thirst, a little more freedom, a little more cessation. But Buddhism does not make a small claim either, though. It doesn't say, yeah, you'll feel a little bit better. There's a guy in the mindfulness space that I also work in, you know, named Dan Harris. You know about Dan Harris? He's a good guy. He was a news anchor, like a hard-charging, drug-using, stressed out, mega professional, top of his game, making a gazillion bucks as the news anchor on TV. And one day, on air, he choked. He froze. He couldn't get another word out, you know. So he experienced some big suffering. And he ended up getting into meditation, much to his surprise. And now he makes his living like running this meditation company. You know? That's kind of great. But anyway, he has a modest claim, this guy Dan Harris. His business and his app and his book and everything are called 10% Happier. Yeah, 10%. No, it's Dan Harris. Yeah, Sam Harris is another guy in the same world, but he's the atheist guy, Sam Harris. This is Dan Harris. But anyway, 10%, that, you know, first I saw that, I'm like, can I have more? You know? But then you think about it, you're like, you know, any significant change matters. Like 10% and then 10, you know, maybe it's compounding interest, you know. Then it's 10% or 10%. But the Buddha does not say 10%. He says 100%, you know. Full freedom from suffering. And then the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path. Like, well, how do we practice this? How do we get there? And of course emptiness says there's no there, but we're still going, you know. We're still moving in that direction. So anyway, the Heart Sutra, after describing, you know, our experience of ourselves in all kinds of different ways and the way the self is formed, and then says, and even the core teachings of Buddhism are empty. Even that is not the way you think it is. Even that you can go deeper. And then on page 6, we get to the good news. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on prajna paramita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. Suddenly does seem like a bit of a change of topic, though. Like we did mention prajna paramita at the very beginning, so that does kind of bring us full circle. So what is prajna paramita? So prajna literally means wisdom. So the bodhisattva, and this is we are bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are beings devoted to freedom and helping each other. So we're bodhisattvas. So they rely on wisdom. They rely on understanding all this emptiness stuff. And paramita means kind of like a positive spin on emptiness. Paramita means going beyond. So wisdom that goes beyond wisdom. Maybe you remember hearing that a minute ago. Is the title we gave the Heart Sutra. And it's right here too, Wisdom Beyond Wisdom. And this is the same paramitas if you've come to the Sunday meetings or listened to any of the talks online. These are the same paramitas that we've been talking about there. So it's all one tradition. It all fits together. So we don't rely on trying to get what we want and perfect ourselves. We let go of ourselves and we rely on wisdom. But this little phrase at the beginning here is not a throwaway phrase, with nothing to attain. So if there was stuff, then we could attain it, right? Stuff could include physical stuff or mental stuff or, philosophical stuff, right? All kinds of stuff. If there was stuff, we could attain it. But if stuff is empty, then there's nothing to attain, right? How can you attain something that's empty? And this is actually an incredibly wonderful thing. This is a radical kind of freedom, to realize that there's nothing to attain. And to say relies on prajnaparamita actually means relies on nothing, There's nothing to attain, and we don't have to, and we rely on that. We rely on that nothingness, that emptiness. And thus we're not stuck anymore, right? So the mind is without hindrance. The stickiness melts away. And when the stickiness melts away, there's nothing to be really afraid of. Even though, then this is not denial, though. This is not denial. Bodhisattvas are still horrified by violence and inequity. Bodhisattvas absolutely care about justice and love. But they take a stance that's sustainable, that's imperturbable. They don't get knocked flat. They're sad. It's upsetting. But they can keep going because they can see how fluid and empty it all is and how temporary it is. And they don't have this problem that we tend to have of mistakenly thinking we can predict what's going to happen next. And usually our predictions are pretty terrible, right? Because past and future are also empty. So the Bodhisattva is just showing up and do their best to help with nothing to attain, relying on nothing. And it says that what happens in their mind is they get beyond inverted views. So what are the inverted views? Well, it turns out there's another list. Would you like to know what the 4 inverted views are? Number 1, the view that anything can ever be permanent. That's an upside down view, inverted, upside down. So, believing in permanence. And this includes stuff we do without thinking about it, our big brain can say, yeah, everything's impermanent, but meanwhile we're clinging on, right, to whatever. Second view, the view that true satisfaction can be found in things or ideas. So it's back to the 4 Noble Truths. The false view that you can get satisfaction out of something like that. The third upside down view is that there's a separate self. The fourth upside down view is that because something is attractive, it's worth striving for and clinging to. That's a false view. It's not worth it. And the idea here is not that the bodhisattvas, go to therapy for a long time and realize that they were mistaken and get new views that are smarter views. The idea is that when we really are deeply in relationship, feeling deeply about emptiness, connected to emptiness, in harmony with emptiness, when that's true, these views just wouldn't come up. You wouldn't think this, And sometimes they use funny little metaphors like saying, it's like thinking of a winged rabbit, You wouldn't think of that, right? Did you ever think of a winged rabbit before? No, because there's no such thing. And yet we think about all kinds of things which are not true either, as real as a winged rabbit, getting lasting satisfaction for something that attracts us. And we still can enjoy things, but in a different way, right? A softer way, a more open way, an appreciative way in the light of emptiness. So once we're beyond all these inverted views, they just don't arise, they non-arise. One realizes nirvana. I'm not sure if realizes is quite the best translation there, but I didn't get around to looking it up. But nirvana is a traditional Buddhist term meaning peace, right? So one realizes true peace. And we could unpack that a lot of ways, but let's keep moving. So when we really appreciate emptiness, we recognize there's nothing I need to do or get, or attain. And I can trust, right? Relying on prajnaparamita, you could also say, is trusting. And then my mind isn't messed up, Great. We're okay. We're peaceful. We're not upside down. And then the next paragraph seems to more or less be a sell job. This is such a good way to go that Buddhas do it this way. Don't you want to do it this way, as good as the Buddhas? Not just any Buddha, all Buddhas, every single one. Past, present, and future, every possible Buddha relies on this, relies on prajnaparamita, and thereby attains unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Now, enlightenment's a bit of a troublemaker in our tradition. On the one hand, it's a beautiful thing, because it offers a sense of vision, Like, wow, we could be much bigger, happier, whatever that you can possibly imagine. And even more than that, right? It's all empty. So beyond anything you can think. But then it sounds like something you would want to attain. Yeah, exactly. So what the heck, And in fact, there's the word, attain. So with nothing to attain, Buddhas attain. So it seems very paradoxical. So I don't know what the best way to think about enlightenment it is. It can encourage you and it can mess you up. Because whatever you might think that it is, it can't be that, right? We know that, right? It can't be a view. It can't be something you can conceptualize, right? Because that's the nature of emptiness. The true reality is beyond anything we can put concepts and words to. And so the word enlightenment is just a pointer, finger pointing to the moon, they say, just like emptiness is a pointer to something. So maybe the best way to leave it for now is have a big vision. You think that's big? No, go bigger. Have a big, big vision for your life and our world, and practice that way. And unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment is actually a literal translation of a particular kind of meditation state, but it's the best one. It's called Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. When I first was practicing, the Heart Sutra had that untranslated, so I always think of the beautiful little Sanskrit phrase, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Makes me happy to think about that. Okay, so now another big pivot. Therefore, and the Sanskrit does have a word that means basically therefore. Therefore, know the prajnaparamita as the great miraculous mantra. What? Did you ever notice how weird that is? After all this kind of logical argumentation and doctrine and deep Buddhist philosophy, and all about how there's nothing to attain and we're all completely free. Therefore, these teachings really can be boiled down to a mantra. And not just any old mantra, a really good mantra. The great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable mantra. And there's all these traditional commentaries about why they picked exactly those adjectives, which don't matter right now. And this mantra is so powerful, it removes all suffering, and it's true, not false. So this is pretty interesting. How do we suddenly get here? Well, mantras, emerging from the spirituality of India, in which Buddha started all this, are a deep and ancient practice, right? The use of sound and also gesture, mudra and mantra are connected words, to express something that can't be expressed in words. So maybe it does fit the idea of emptiness, right? Emptiness is pointing to the reality being bigger than words. So mantra are sounds that can't be translated into words. Sometimes there are actual words in there, but it's about the sounds. So one commentary, ancient commentary I read, said the mantra is there for the really advanced students. They don't have to read the first part. They just need the mantra, and then they'll understand the whole thing. And then it said, fair to Midland students like us, we need the whole thing and the mantra. And everybody else can't understand this anyway, so don't worry about them. But what the mantra does, though, is it provides a practice. How do we practice no form, no feelings, no perceptions? It's a non-practice. But a mantra is something that we can do. It's something we can embody. It's something we can express and put our heart energy into. We can say the sounds of a mantra with great passion and energy, and something absolutely happens. And then, of course, they're messing with us a little bit again here, kind of like what can't be attained should be attained. True and false would seem like concepts that don't make any sense in the light of emptiness, right? Because they sound fixed. And emptiness is saying that nothing is fixed. So what's going on here? None of the commentators seem to quite know why they said true and not false. Just to cheer us up that it's really good stuff, I guess. And it's so powerful, it frees us completely, 100%, removes all suffering. So then there is actually no more need for the Four Noble Truths because there's no suffering there that needs to be processed in that way. Therefore, we proclaim. There's the therefore again. So just say the mantra, Maybe it's kind of like you sit through a lot of long lectures like you've had to do here, sorry. And in the end, the teacher's just like, yeah, forget all about that stuff, Just fill in the blank. Just be happy. Just proclaim the mantra. Just do whatever the thing is. Just do it, So therefore we proclaim the Prajnaparamita mantra, the mantra that says Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi, Svaha. So this is really about the power of sound, and there is also meaning in this particular Gate, this particular mantra. So Gate means gone, like gone beyond. Para and Parasam are modifiers to Gate. So literally it means something like gone, gone, gone beyond, completely beyond, awakening, yes! Svaha at the end doesn't literally mean yes, but that's the spirit of it. It's kind of an exhalation. It's actually kind of a onomatopoeic word. It just means the sound. Svaha! Right? What else could that mean? Svaha! So, but then what's interesting is this is a core text in Zen, chanted everywhere, every Zen center, every day. How many millions of times has it been chanted? Who knows? And occasionally the gata gets used a little bit somewhere or other, but basically it's not a systematic part of Zen practice to chant the Heart Sutra mantra, which doesn't stop you from chanting it. So I recommend it. I recommend. Maybe when you're out hiking on your own or something, you could chant this as you walk. Gate, gate, para, gate, prasam, gate, bodhisvaha, gate, gate. And maybe it'll really help you. Maybe you chant it to yourself when things are really tough in your life. Gate, gate. Maybe you chant it on your last days before you pass from this living world. So they boiled it down to a mantra, but then for whatever reason the mantra wasn't so much baked into Zen practice as we received it. So there ends our version of the Heart Sutra. Maybe you vaguely remember from a long time back, there's a longer version that has a little frame story at the beginning and a conclusion at the end. So here's the conclusion. This version is chanted in Tibetan Buddhism. Presumably was written in India. So after all this happened, you remember the frame story from the beginning, the Buddha was there, The Buddha's not mentioned at all in our version, but the Buddha's here. The Buddha goes into a deep practice and inspires the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, and one of the Buddha's chief early students, Shariputra, to have a dialogue. Inspires them both to have dialogue. And so essentially, through their voices, they're expressing the Buddha's teachings, with Ananda teaching and Shariputra as a student. So then the conclusion is, then the Buddha rose from his concentration and complimented the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara Mahasattva, saying, well done, daughter of good family. So it is, so it is. Just as you have taught it, so should the deep perfection of wisdom be practiced. Even the Tathagatas, the Buddhas, are full of joy. Thus spoke the Buddha. Enraptured, the Venerable Shariputra, the monk who was learning all this, enraptured, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, and the whole world, with its gods, people, Asuras, Gandharvas, all kinds of creatures, rejoiced in the Buddha's teaching. So that's the Heart Sutra. At least one way of looking at it. Let's talk together about this. Find yourself a trio in a minute. Find yourself a trio. We'll take turns. I'll do the ringing the bell thing to kind of hold the spaciousness. And just say whatever comes to mind. If you're just meeting this for the first time, who knows what you'll say. If you're meeting this for the millionth time, who knows what you'll say. What struck you? What strikes you about the Heart Sutra? What seems helpful or interesting or important or vexing or perplexing? What comes up for you around these teachings? Is there anything in daily life that comes up that these teachings support you in? Just see what comes up. And then the beautiful, incredible possibility of getting to do a little trio work like that is that you get to listen to two other thoughtful people struggling with the same question, you know. So we hold each other with grace and hold it all in confidence, and whatever you say is the perfect thing to say. If you're not sure what to say, you can just say, I really don't know what to say, and then sit a minute and see what comes. It'll be time turns, like 3 or 4 minutes, and so if it's your turn, you really do get the whole time. So if you don't want to say much more, you can just sit in silence. That's fine. This crowd knows how to hang out with you in silence. But maybe something else will bubble up. In other words, it's not on the table to be like, I'm not really sure what to say, thanks, my turn's over, thanks, bye. No, you still have your time, you know, and get to just be together, okay? There might be a group of 4. Try not to be in that group of 4. Let's try to have groups of 3.